What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Gold Standard podcast. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera. He's Levin Black. Levin, happy Thursday.
Yeah, I'm just anxiously waiting for Saturday, if I'm being honest, if you can't guess.
Yes, you got the Purdue hat on. Your Boilermakers are in the Final Four. I'm sure you're very excited.
Yeah, I'm doing whatever I can to distract myself. I mean, you were around me the week before the Super Bowl, but we were covering it, so I wasn't able to do what I normally do, where I kind of I look, but then I go, ooh, I don't want to look because then that starts to get me too excited too early, and I try to avoid things. But then at the same time, when a good article comes out or a good video comes out, I can't help but look. So it's kind of like looking inside the present box before you're allowed to open it. I'm at that point of trying to openly avoid thinking about it.
Where would this rank for you before we get to some 49ers stuff? Obviously, you root for Purdue, you root for the 49ers. In terms of all your fandoms, where would a championship for Purdue basketball rank?
It's hard to know what the championship, because the focus has always been Final Four, because they hadn't made one since 1980, despite a dozen Big Ten championships, being in the tournament 30 times. It's hard for Niner fans to understand the turmoil, the torment that Purdue basketball is. It is the biggest basketball crazy state. It is the most successful Big Ten program in terms of Big Ten championships in the entire Big Ten in a basketball crazy state. I grew up, I had an uncle that had a basketball hoop in the upstairs of his barn. You know what I mean? I have shot hoops in a barn that is stereotypical Indiana. So I would say it probably rates right up there with the Super Bowl. If they were to win the actual championship, it rates right up there with the Super Bowl. But if I'm being honest, I would say it's probably a little less. And the reason why it's a little less probably has to do with the fact that not as many people care. It's not more about, it's not so much internal. It's the fact that if Purdue wins the national basketball championship, most people are going to be like, oh, hey, cool. If the Niners win the Super Bowl, the mileage I get out of that with other fans and coworkers and, people I interact with is a lot longer. So I get to kind of revel in it a lot more.
100% understand that. Well, good luck. I will not be rooting for them because I'll be rooting for UConn. But
I was going to say, you will probably not be watching. I mean, college sports are not huge to you, are they not?
Well, I will be watching. I'm going to be on ESPN Radio Sunday this afternoon, 3 to 7 p.m. Eastern time. So we'll be talking men's national championship. The women's national championship game is Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So we'll be breaking that down as well. So, yes, I will be heavily invested in college sports this weekend. Before we get to the Brandon Aiyuk stuff very, very quickly, we got to give a little love. We got to share a little congratulations. Brad Graham is this year's winner of the 2024 Media Madness tournament. He took down the former champion and Eric Crocker, who made it back to the title matchup. But Brad Graham, he's been killing it this year. He's been everywhere, basically. You see his work on YouTube, the SF Niners, on Instagram. He's all over it. Shout out to Brad. You get the trophy this year. I'm going to send you the trophy, and a well-deserved victory.
Talk about dedication. The guy had his flights canceled to Vegas and drove through the night just to get to Vegas for the start of media week when 2/3 of the media doesn't show up until halfway through the week.
There's a reason.
Yep.
So, Brad, thank you for playing along. And I know he was tweeting out links to vote and putting out links to his website on Instagram and everything. So that was very, very cool. And we always appreciate that. And again, if you were unfamiliar, I had some people say, I don't even know who Brad Graham is. I started sending them links to the YouTube page.
That's on
the
them.
Instagram.
Hey, the largest or second largest 49er centric YouTube. You don't know who the guy is?
Right.
Okay. That's on you.
So congrats, Brad Graham. Okay. Let's get to the Brandon Aiyuk situation. I just sat down yesterday with Mike Silver of the San Francisco Chronicle. That interview is up on YouTube now. It's available for podcast download. Please go and check it out. Not now. This is our time. But there was one part of the interview that I did want to play because it made me think that a Brandon Aiyuk trade during the draft is way more of a possibility than I initially thought. So I'll play the clip and then we can react to it. And I really hope this actually works because sometimes it doesn't work. So bear with me.
Going to be a pain in the butt to the level Debo was, and you just don't want to deal with that in an all-in season. Maybe as the draft approaches and as you're in real time in the draft and looking at who's on the board, you're listening and you're poking around. So I think all things could happen. I think they could get him to play on the fifth-year option. I think they could sweeten the fifth year and kick the can. I think they could trade him even in real time during the draft. Or I think they could pay him knowing that probably means Debo, Kittle, or both are gone after next year and you worry about it next year. So I'm keeping an eye on the whole thing. It's a fascinating, internal debate. And I know they think about it that way all the time.
So that last part really stuck out to me, that they think about the Debo, Kittle, Aiyuk, and how basically it's coming to an end. And they're aware of it. They're preparing for it. And they basically just have to decide which way to go.
So as the cap is now, next season, the 49ers are well above the salary cap. Now, the salary cap will go up, so they're probably about equal to what the salary cap will go up. But I believe they're about $26 million over the cap as things sit. Obviously, there's a lot of things they can do to continue to kick the can down the road. But next year is when there's a lot of other things they can do. In post June 1st cuts, they can save $17.5 million from Debo. They can save I forget the exact number on Kittle, but it's double-digit millions. And they can save $20 million on Javon Hargrave, which if Hargrave has a similar season to what he had last year, I'm pretty sure they're going to do that because he was not worth the money this past year, which wasn't to say he was a bad player. He just wasn't a difference maker. But those three combined, just in cutting them post June 1st, saves $52 million. So I think paying Aiyuk shouldn't be a huge factor because they can save a ton of money. They have a ton of flexibility next offseason with a bunch of the older players that are going to be hitting decline years, where I think what the Niners would do with somebody like Kittle, they're going to approach him kind of in an Armstead situation and say, take a pay cut or we're going to have to move on. He's going to be in his 30s and things like that. And I think Debo, I don't think they offer that to Debo. I think Debo's gone.
Don't forget too, they're going to save up, what is it, $18 million come this June once the Eric Armstead savings, post June 1 savings hits the book as well. So there's also money that's going to come off. They can always carry over into future years. So that's the question for me. And this guy comments, not going to pay attention until Brandon Aiyuk requests a trade. That's if he does. Otherwise, all smoke of contract talks until it's not. How much of a pain is Brandon Aiyuk going to be? Or to say it a better way, is he going to play hardball? Do you think that he will eventually request a trade and let it be known that he's not going to show up and all that stuff?
I feel like if he was going to do that, he already would have. I feel like this is the normal period where the Niners don't negotiate. They made an offer probably just before free agency a month ago, and then they sit. We know that from multiple other players, including Debo, where they made basically an insulting offer, which I think, if I remember correctly, Debo said $27 million or $17 million a year, and then they didn't give him a new offer. They would not engage in contract talks at all until July rolled around. So I would bet that they're going to do the same thing with Aiyuk. So I feel like Aiyuk would have already in the past month said, all right, you're not going to negotiate with me. You made me a crappy offer. I'm going to go public with a trade. Now, I feel like he could potentially, I don't think he's behind the scenes like Debo. To me, the vibe I get in that Silver comment there kind of confirms that it's behind the scenes. Debo was probably yelling and screaming and, calling them up and being a problem all off season, being a nuisance. I don't get that vibe from Aiyuk. I'm pretty sure Aiyuk has said, this is where I'm at. This is what I need. Until you come to there, I'll be over here. You know what I mean? I don't think he's the same type of person that Debo is in terms of he's not a very loud person. You don't see him very often going out there saying, look at me. He's not that type of wide receiver. He doesn't have that diva aspect. At least we haven't seen it yet.
He did go on the nightcap He doesn't usually do a ton of interviews. Now that was Shannon Sharp and Ocho Cinco, so maybe that was part of the reason why. And he was cordial. Like he said, we've got professionals on both sides. And, he didn't sound particularly upset with the 49ers, but it was also maybe it was like, hey, things are good now, but, if it doesn't go the way, like I'm willing to get out there. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Daza says paying Brandon Aiyuk isn't so much of an issue. Debo, I think, is gone, but why pay him and then continue not using him like a top wide receiver? Brandon Aiyuk wants to be paid and featured. That's the other point that we've talked about is that if you're going to pay a guy, use him. They don't always do that, except for McCaffrey. They're paying McCaffrey and they are using the hell out of Christian McCaffrey. So I want him, yes. And they pay Trent Williams and they use the hell out of Trent Williams too, because anytime they need to run, they run to the left. But like Kittle, Debo, Aiyuk, they spread the ball out so much that you don't really get bang for your buck.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the Niners, if Aiyuk's saying, look, it's not just money, I want to be featured too, the Niners can say, look, we get that. We think you'll have a better year this next year than you had last year. You'll have a few more opportunities. And then the year after that, you will be the guy because we are likely moving on from Debo and there's a chance we move on from others. You know what I mean? Like they could also make the argument of like, look, Debo's starting to decline. Kittle is in decline. So you're going to be ascending at the right time for us. So even if we keep those guys in the future, you're going to get more targets because you're hitting your peak while they're hitting their decline. There's a lot of ways that they can pitch him to say that he's going to get more opportunity. And I don't think that those would be lies either.
Yeah, and I think that's a natural sort of evolution of this team. It's interesting that, Mike basically talked about how the team thinks about the Debo, Kittle, Aiyuk kind of triumvirate all the time, and they know that they might have to get rid of one or possibly both of those players. I'll leave it up to you. You've got Aiyuk right now in the current contract situation he's in. You've got Kittle with his deal, Debo with his deal. How would you do it from this point forward, and how would you do it next year if you somehow manage to keep Aiyuk this year?
So I put out my best guess of a contract for Aiyuk, and I think it's a very realistic contract that both parties would be pretty happy with. And that was 4 years. And I go for because I looked at Debo's contract as a pretty good guiding light in terms of what they could offer, and then adjusted it for the current cap. So one of the wrinkles is the cap has gone up and it's essentially 22.7% since Debo signed his contract just 2 years ago. So if you add that 22.7% to what Debo got per year, which was 23.85 million, you're over 29 million a year average. Now, I don't think Aiyuk's going to get there. And from what we know, Aiyuk's not asking for it. So what I put out there was a 4-year contract, which is 1 extra year from Debo because he doesn't have the injury risk that Debo has because Debo was half running back at 102 million. So that's 25.5 million a year. He gets 25 million signing bonus, which is a couple million more than what Debo got. But the real key to this is that he gets 53 million guaranteed, which is only 2 years of the contract essentially. But that 53 million fully guaranteed would be a record for any wide receiver in NFL history. It tops what Tyreek Hill just got. So I think that's kind of like the feather in Aiyuk's cap. All right, I got more than Debo. I didn't quite get what the fair market rate would be in today's market, but I did get more than Debo. I got more of a signing bonus. I got the record for fully guaranteed. I think that would be a fair compromise. And if you structure it in that way and you make Aiyuk's salary the first year $2 million, which Debo was actually all the way down at $1 million. But if you say $2 million, that lowers his cap hit from the 5th-year option by almost $7 million. So like it's kind of like a win all over the board with that contract. And I think it's very realistic to what he should get.
If you're watching on the stream right now, you can see a shot of The Athletic. David Lombardi has an article in The Athletic now about what a contract for Brandon Aiyuk would look like. If you go by average per year, Tyreek Hill is number 1 at 30 million. Then it's Devontae Adams at 28, Cooper Kupp 26.7, AJ Brown 25, DK Metcalf 24. But Mike Florio pointed out on ProFootballTalk.com that the Hill number at $30 million a year is a fugazi number, to quote Mike. He said it's inflated by a bogus 2026 compensation package of $45 million. If you take that away, Tyreek Hill is at $28.3 million. I'm not paying Aiyuk $28 million. I wouldn't do that. I would try to put it down probably about the AJ Brown deal, $25 million. That'd probably be where I would be at if I were the 49ers. And I don't know that I'd want to go much higher than that.
Yeah, so I have him at 25.5. He would come in there. Now, a key point here, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see it on the right. Look at the signed. Not a single one of those was last year.
It's crazy.
All of these are 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just said, that means they signed the same offseason Debo did, which means the salary cap has gone up 22.7% since this time. So if you take, say, the Devontae Adams, or you said AJ Brown, $25 million. If you take that $25 million and you add 22.7%, you're adding about a little over $6 million to that. So AJ Brown's fair market deal, if you took what he signed in 2022 and put it in 2024 numbers, is $31 million. So that's not what Aiyuk's going to get, but that shows you, like, all right, if AJ Brown was worth $25 million in 2022 numbers, then there's no reason you can't afford to pay 27, 28 to Aiyuk. I just don't think they have to go that high, because I think Aiyuk would settle for less.
So what we just did completely organically is you just argued Aiyuk's agent's side of the deal, and I just argued the 49ers side of the deal, because the Niners are going to compare to the actual numbers of the contracts that are there.
And what happens in real life? If somebody came to you and said, hey, I want to sign you, I'm going to offer you this contract that in inflation terms for the average year of inflation in the United States would be almost a decade ago. It'd be like 7-8 years ago. I'm going to offer you a salary that was fair 7-8 years ago. You would say, no, you're going to offer me in today's numbers.
Again, you're doing the agent's work. And I get that. I know the agent's going to be like, look, just paying that number that you laid out is like, that's not even giving him a raise. That's just keeping up with the cost of living. I don't know. I don't know if Aiyuk will request a trade. It'd be interesting.
Let's say this. We don't know if he has already. He is the type, I believe, that if he does request one, unless he gets the sense that there's no way they're signing me, like they're just never going to come to the table, at that point, I think he goes public. But right now, I think the sense is, from what I think we both agree, what we see out of John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan and Aiyuk, all of them want to find an agreement. There is an eventual spot where they can agree to. That all of them are still being pretty cordial, as you put it earlier. So I feel like Aiyuk might have requested a trade, saying, look, if that's all you're going to offer me, trade me. But he's not going to go public with it, because it's just not his MO.
Right. Does he say, are they in a spot right now too, where like they are talking, because both sides want to know, where are we? How possible is this? Because the draft is coming up. The draft is what, the 25th. So it's 20 days away, more or less 21 days away. If you feel like it can't come to pass, the Niners are going to want to trade him during the draft to get picks back for him. Yeah. So it could be that they are having discussions right now, and we'll see if those remain cordial or if not. Mike, again talking with Mike Silver, he definitely gave the impression that literally a trade could happen as the 49ers are on the clock or on, draft night.
Yeah. So if he is traded, I feel like the way in which he's traded is those top 3 wide receivers all win. Like, let's say they all go in the top 12 picks. Now you're in the 13, 14, 15, all the way to, somewhere in the low 20s, where there's an offensive lineman that the Niners feel like that's a day one starter at tackle. And we would be willing to give up Aiyuk to get him. And then we can draft a wide receiver at 31 or whatever. You know what I mean? I feel like that's the only scenario, is that there was a team that wanted one of those top 3 wide receivers. They struck out. They weren't able to get it. Now they come back to the Aiyuk market, the trade market. Aiyuk's easily the best wide receiver out there. And they say, hey, we will give you pick 16, 17, 18 for Aiyuk. And at that point, there's still somebody on the board that the Niners go, that's a day one starter that we want no matter what. So we're willing to do this.
I was talking with Grant on Wednesday, right after the Stephon Diggs trade went down. And I mean, you look at Buffalo right now. I mean, how could they not be interested in Brandon Aiyuk? Like,
They don't have the ammo. 28. No, thank you.
I don't know, 28, maybe you pay. I mean, first of all, we've seen the Bills give up a lot to get a wide receiver. I remember the Sammy Watkins deal.
Yeah, but I feel like the market for wide receivers has shifted in the last couple of years. The market shifted. You do not see wide receivers getting traded for a whole heck of a lot anymore. Look at Diggs. Diggs was just traded for a second-round pick.
Yeah, he went for very little.
I feel like 5 years ago, he would have been a first and maybe something else.
I think if Buffalo wanted him, they could get him. If you're the Bills, like, you still have Josh Allen. I know they lost some talent, but clearly they have a need at wide receiver. Why would you want to roll the dice on a receiver in the draft who, let's be honest, most of them are going to not be good? That's just the reality of the situation. With Aiyuk, you have a proven player. You have a player that by all accounts is ascending and could be even better than anything he's shown. We know the Bills can get players the ball. I mean, Stephon Diggs, I think, led the league in targets since going to Buffalo. So clearly they know how to get him the ball. He'd be happy there. He'd still have a chance to win. I would be stunned if the Bills and the 49ers have not at least discussed it already.
Yeah, the question is, though, who called who? That's the key aspect there. Did Diggs get traded and the Niners picked up the phone right away and said, hey, because at that point, that signifies Ayuk's on the move. Ayuk's going to get moved. If it was the Bills that made the trade and said, hey, to the Niners, well, then the Niners are probably still in the same boat that I believe they're in, which is, look, we're not going to trade. We don't have plans to trade Aiyuk. But if somebody comes with too good of an offer on draft day where we know the guy that we would be willing to trade up for is still on the board because that pick is up, then we will pull the trigger. Like, I don't feel like the Niners are going to say, oh, you offered us pick 17. All right, we're going to go ahead and take that right now, and we'll just see who falls to us. I don't feel like the Niners are in that boat where they want to just see if somebody falls to them.
I don't know if they are or not. I don't know how big of a need do they consider wide receiver right now? And two, how big of a need would they consider it if they moved off of Aiyuk? And how confident would they be that they could get somebody that would replace them? Yeah. We know that Tyler Boyd's name has popped up as potentially someone they were interested in. And maybe if they trade Aiyuk, then they, try to bring him in and to mitigate some of that. We'll have to see.
Boyd and Debo a championship winning wide receiver pairing?
No, but neither was Aiyuk and Debo. So,
yeah, but they're a lot better than that. Boyd is not Aiyuk. There's a reason why Boyd's still on the market.
Daza0187 says, if we do trade Brandon Aiyuk, realistically, who can come in and replace him? Our scheme is hard to pick up for a rookie, and you need a good and willing blocker. Yeah. You don't have to do it the same way, though, right? Like, you can say that, but what if the answer is, hey, get Boyd or draft a wide receiver and just give Kittle way more targets? Like, you don't have to replicate exactly what you did last year. You can do it in different ways. And so I'm confident in Kyle that he'd be able to figure it out if they did trade Brandon Aiyuk.
Would the offense be good enough? Yeah, probably, because Kyle made it good enough even with much worse than what would be left. But that I think the good enough falters when you face a top defense. That's the difference. Like, when you get in the playoffs, you're going to face a top defense. And if you're relying on, well, our guys aren't all that good, we have to rely on Kyle to get you open, you're screwed. And that's the key part to Aiyuk is he doesn't have to rely on Debo or rely on Kyle to get him open. He gets himself open. Well, and I think that opens up other aspects.
People always say that, and I get what they mean, but let's not act like Kyle Shanahan isn't helping Brandon Aiyuk.
No, he is, but I'm saying, like, when the going gets tough, which you are guaranteed to hit a point in the playoffs, when you're having a game like that, you need a difference maker. Somebody that's going to beat his guy organically, not somebody that, well, if we scheme and all these things and the defense plays it wrong, now you're open. Basically, what I'm saying is you need an Aiyuk, not a Debo, in those games. And that's exactly what has been proven over the last couple of years. When we have a game plan that's not quite working out, it wasn't the best game plan, Debo is shit.
Why do you have to swear every week?
I'm sorry, he can't overcome it. Like that's the problem with Debo. That's why he can't be your number one wide receiver.
This guy, points out draft picks are still not enough for Aiyuk. Need a player with a pick. How folks don't know this. 49ers draft like crap in the first round anyway in recent years. That's the other thing. Like, you don't have to trade Brandon Aiyuk for just picks. The thing is, it'd be interesting if a team traded a wide receiver for a wide receiver. Usually that doesn't happen. But you're right. Or you could trade Aiyuk for picks and then trade those picks to another team for a wide receiver. So, like, you know, there's different ways that you can do it. I've heard people say, and I have said, that you're not really doing Brock Purdy any favors by trading away Brandon Aiyuk, but there's different ways to support your quarterback, right? If you use the picks that you get from Aiyuk to bolster the offensive line, that is supporting Brock Purdy. That is helping Brock Purdy. So there are a bunch of different ways to do it. We don't know how the 49ers feel about Juwan Jennings. I mean, clearly in crunch time in the Super Bowl, in 3rd and goal, in overtime, they drew up a play for Juwan Jennings. They didn't draw it up for Aiyuk or Debo or McCaffrey. They drew it up for Juwan. So they must feel decently about him. So maybe if they think that they have to trade Brandon Aiyuk, that they'd be able to get by with Juwan and Debo.
I can't believe that. Like, I understand what you're saying. I don't think so. Jennings, you can't overcome the lack of speed. He is a great third option because he comes with that physicality, the blocking, and he comes with a high point ability as a wide receiver. But he's not running those X routes where he's getting wide open on a post route 15, 20 yards down the field. That's not him. That's not Jennings. If it was, a team would have come and signed him for 15, 20 million a year.
I don't know why you consistently give Brandon Aiyuk credit for high pointing the ball. I can't remember a single jump ball catch that Brandon Aiyuk has won in his career.
He's got a lot of them.
He does?
Yes, he does. There was a stat that came out at the end of the year about wide receivers where they had, it was basically no cushion. A DB was on them, and success rate on getting the reception in Aiyuk, if I remember correctly, was 2nd in the league in this past year.
I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying I don't remember it. When I think of Aiyuk, I think of him being wide ass open and catching the ball because most of the time he is. Adrian Zarenko, hopefully I said that name right. I apologize if I didn't. Says being good enough in the regular season is one thing. Showing up as a rookie in the playoffs is another. Yes, but Debo showed up in the playoffs as a rookie in 2019. So did Nick Bosa. Like, it's not out of the question. It's not impossible. I get what you're saying. It's risky. And for sure, this would be a risk. 100%. Absolutely, it would be. But
Debo showed up in the playoffs as a rookie by being something the league hadn't seen and wasn't ready for.
Yeah, that's what rookies generally, that's how they have success.
You know what I mean? Like, they were using him as a running back. They were using him on, disguised wide receiver screens, things that takes time for the defense to go, okay, that's what they're doing. And now we've seen where none of that works anymore because the defenses saw it and have adjusted to it.
Or how about you just draft a good wide receiver? Then they're good because they
did. And now it's time to sign him.
Chris Maldonado, YouTube channel member for 11 months. Thank you, Chris. Would y'all be okay with BA to Kansas City for their first?
No.
For 32? Oh.
I'm not okay with trading Aiyuk. Like, I get it if you get one of the top 3 wide receivers. And for some reason, somebody out there is willing to give you, say, the 12th pick when one of those neighbors, Adonze or not Harrison. Harrison won't be there, but he's the other wide receiver.
Yeah.
If one of those is there, but no teams, if they need a wide receiver, they're not going to trade that pick if the player's sitting there on the board. So that's the only way I would be okay with trading Aiyuk. And other than that, like, I don't care if it's pick 15 and those wide receivers are gone. I'm not okay with it.
You wouldn't be okay with trading Aiyuk and getting a stud right tackle.
I would not be happy with the trade. I would understand it at that point, but I would not be happy. If they trade for something 28, 29, or 32 with Kansas City, I will be openly mad about it.
I wouldn't want to trade with Kansas City just because, like, dude, they don't need the help.
Right. I wouldn't. When I said no while you were reading the question, I didn't even think about the draft pick. I was thinking about there's no effing way I am giving BA to Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, that's not ideal. Plus, you're getting a worse pick than the one you already have, too.
Yeah.
So it would, I mean, now if you get like a first and a second next year, but even that, it's the Chiefs. It's going to be like a late second round pick. Yeah, no, I'm all set with that. I would be okay in certain circumstances. It depends on the return for me. Now, and not only does it depend on the return, it depends on what they do with it, right? Like if they traded Aiyuk for a 7th round pick, but then drafted, the equivalent of Terrell Owens in the 7th round, great. Then that's a great trade for the 49ers.
In retrospect, like 3 years down the road, you would know that, but at the time you would be irate, losing your mind.
Well, yes, but my point is like they could trade Aiyuk for the number 1 overall pick, and if the player they use that pick on stinks, it's a bad trade. So
yeah, in retrospect, but I have a hard time. Like there's two different ways to look at the trades: retrospect and in the moment. In the moment, what they did with Buckner and going and getting Kinlaw was the right decision. So I'm not going to fault them in retrospect, but in retrospect, yeah, it wasn't a great trade. Most trades are not good in retrospect.
Yeah, I think that people get too caught up in the number attached to the draft pick and not enough. They don't care nearly as much as the player that pick ends up being.
Yeah, and people want to react now, not, oh, well, they traded for something I thought is less than they should have. I'll let you know in 2 years how I feel.
Right. And we wouldn't do that either, to be fair. Strawberry React says, I definitely don't want them reaching for an O-line, even at 31. So if a defensive player is best available, so be it. Yeah, that's the other question they're going to have to ask themselves, regardless of what happens with Brandon Aiyuk. If they're at 31, do you want, depending on how the board falls, offensive tackle number 5 or 6 or 7 in this draft? Is it that good? Or do you want defensive lineman number 3 or 4, or maybe corner number 3 or 4? Like they've got to decide that too.
So this is the difference between how teams look at things and how fans have to look at things. Fans get caught up on, oh, well, that was the 4th offensive tackle taken. Wow, I can't believe you traded number 1 wide receiver for that. Teams don't care about where a player is in their. Oh, this is the 4th offensive tackle. They rank everybody together, and that 4th offensive tackle, especially in this year's draft class, might be the 15th best player they had on their board. Teams don't look at it as, well, what number in that position do we consider him? They look at it as, how good is this player and can he play right away? Fans can't do that because fans, nobody, I don't care if they're Rich Madrid, knows the Niners scheme. I'm not throwing shade. I'm giving credit to Rich Madrid because I think he knows his stuff when he watches film. But I'm saying nobody knows the Niners system well enough because it takes being in that room. Like there's all kinds of you can see what you want to see in film, but that only goes so far. My point is that nobody knows how well a player can truly fit in the scheme, and the teams themselves struggle with that. That's why so many draft picks bust, right? So to me, like teams don't get caught up on, well, I'm not trading up to get the 4th best offensive tackle. They look at it as, I'm trading up to get a guy I'm plugging in as the day 1 starter, because they know that. We can't know that from where we're at.
Yeah, I agree. I thought you were throwing shade at Rich, not going to lie. I would have supported it.
Somebody that sits and watches film all the time and learns a lot, knows a lot about the X's and O's. If you read his stuff, like he does know X's and O's extremely well, better than you or I do. You know what I mean? He can truly talk the schemes. It doesn't matter. Like, things change every year. The 49ers offense of next season will not be the same offense we saw this past season. And only Kyle Shanahan probably knows that at this point.
I want drama. I want you to throw shade at Rich, damn it. Andre Gerbe, YouTube channel member, says Kyle has reached in many drafts and they don't work out. If you can't get a top 7 tackle, why reach? Maybe you get the best guard or the best corner, don't reach. Yeah, I would be fine if they took a guard in the 1st round too. Like, you need it. You need it. And people will complain about, oh, guards, and you're taking a guard too high. If you need it, get it. That's it's a simple philosophy. Like I don't know.
I understand. Like, I understand both avenues there. If there truly is a guard that's like, wow, this guy is ridiculous, and you know that right away, like the guy with the Colts. God, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Future Hall of Famer, drafted as a guard, came out of Notre Dame. You knew right away.
Quentin
Nelson. Yeah. Quentin Nelson. Like, if you got a guard like that, I get it. But to me, like, guard is a position that I'm not looking to draft in the 1st round unless it's somebody that's essentially a slam dunk as you can get as a prospect at that position.
But if you like ordinarily, yes, but if you look at the 49ers, it's not like they have that many holes. So if that's one of your holes, it doesn't matter what other teams would normally do in that situation. Like that position, that player at that spot has more value for you and your team than he might for somebody else. So I would be okay with it. Just get good players. How about that? How about they just draft good players? Can we say that? Can we agree on that?
Yeah. So if you have a player that you value a lot more than other teams, that's the scenario that you trade down, not up.
I guess, but like everybody loves to praise the teams that trade down. Anytime a team trades down, look at all, good job. Look at all the picks you got. Sometimes that's not always the right move. Just get your guy. You don't have to worry about like, did we wait as long as possible to get him? Because 2 years from now, nobody's going to care. No one's going to care if you could have drafted Debo 3 picks later than you drafted him. They care about whether
Hold
you
on.
got him.
That's true most of the time, but I know a certain somebody that still brings up the fact that the Niners could have had Mahomes. And if you're watching the show, you're looking at two people that do that.
Right, but they didn't pick Mahomes.
Right. I'm saying like there are scenarios where people still care. Like you drafted that guy when you could have had that guy.
Right, but I'm saying like no one cares if the good player you picked, you could have got later in the draft. That's what I mean.
I got you. I got you.
Daza is back, says a lot of our current issues would be solved if we took Tristan Wirfs. It certainly would be better than what they got from Kinlaw, obviously.
We would have multiple Super Bowls and no problems if we took Mahomes.
So, yeah, right.
I mean,
that's
and that's true for what, 9 other teams?
That's true for any other team that they could have traded up.
That's what I'm saying. Like nine. Yeah, I get what you're saying now. But he was picked 10th. So like there were 9 other teams that it didn't matter what team they were and who they had at quarterback. If they had taken Mahomes, they would probably have at least one Super Bowl right now.
Yeah, I hate that guy, man. He's so damn good. Yeah, we don't need to dive into that. But so that's the Aiyuk situation. I'm really interested. Maybe I'm like building the draft up in my head, but I feel like something crazy is going to go down. And this is not like me having talked to anybody or anything like that.
Yeah.
I feel like the scenario that's least likely is the Niners keep Aiyuk and they stay at 31. I feel like something's going to happen. They're going to trade up. They're going to trade Aiyuk. Maybe they trade Aiyuk after. Well, they probably wouldn't trade him after day one, but I just don't feel like it's going to be status quo come draft night.
I honestly don't have a gut feeling either way on that. Like, I feel like this is a weird off season for me where I don't know what the team is doing. Like, I don't have a good sense of what they do. And part of that is the fact that I think Kyle is truly okay with his offensive line as is. So, like, normally I would be like, oh, they're definitely going to look to get one of those offensive tackles. So I expect them to move up. I don't get that sense. Like, that's what my brain tells me. I'm not happy with the offensive line. They should move up and try to get one of those offensive tackles. But if you're trying to read the tea leaves, the demeanor and the way in which Kyle has talked about things, I do not get the sense that they think the same way as I do in that. So, like, this is an offseason where I truly go, I don't know. They could be, and they're just not showing it. They could not be. They could totally stand pat. I could see them doing a Patriots year where we wait all day to 31 and then, they traded out. They're not even drafting today.
Oh, God. If they went 3 years without a first round pick and then voluntarily got out in year 4, oh my God.
Well, I'm a big proponent that if you're there at the end of the first, trade down because it's always worth it to me. Unless there's very few years where somebody truly fell that I deem, all right, this guy is clearly better than anybody else you're going to get if you wait till tomorrow. But to me, like trading down and getting a second pick, normally you also get like a third and a sixth. It's like, yeah, I'll trade down to 37, 38 from 31 and pick up all that.
Unless you want a guy for that extra year. Yeah. That's the only difference.
That's true.
There.
That is true. Before we fully move on, though, I did want to touch on one aspect of that Silver clip that you played earlier.
Okay.
He said something, and I thought about it in the moment when you played it. I mean, you were playing that clip when I first signed in before we went live, so I kind of heard it. The second time through, I had a different thought. He talked about how if Aiyuk's going to be as much of a pain in the butt in the background as Debo was, that made me wonder if maybe part of the reason why Debo gets his targets no matter what is because Kyle has to choose what's best for the team. And even if he thinks, all right, I'm going to give him a play or two that I don't think this is the best thing to do, but if I don't, he's going to crater and completely shut down mentally in this game. And I would rather give him a play or two that I know isn't the best choice and keep him in it. And like he's catering to him to keep Debo engaged, keep him from fully like losing it and creating a fracture within the locker room. That would make a lot more sense of that's why Kyle keeps doing that, because he feels like he has to, or Debo's going to be like, F you guys.
If that's true, then they should have traded him before signing him to that contract.
Agreed.
I hope that's not it. Who knows? I mean, head coaches do have to sort of balance that kind of mental space of guys, of keeping them involved and invested in the game plan. But like, if your highest paid guy on offense is a guy that you have to get the ball to, otherwise he's going to shut down, like that ain't it for me, man. That ain't. And you would have traded Debo.
That's most high paid wide receivers though. Like, get them the ball or they start getting pissy.
Well, but there's a difference between getting mad and like literally like starting to dog it on the field. Like, you could be mad and still put forth a lot of effort.
Debo dogs it on the field anyways.
That's, I mean, I know.
You see it when he's got no chance of being the guy that gets the ball on a play, he walks, which is my biggest problem with him to begin with. It's like, you want to get paid, but you want to go, well, I'm not getting the ball, so I'm just going to sit here and not do my job. Like, that to me would have been the deal breaker already. That, all right, you're out of here. I'm not having that mentality on my team.
Lee Ving says a pro that gets paid should do their job, period. You're right, but like, go watch any of the JT O'Sullivan breakdowns. As he always likes to say, the film is the film.
Yeah.
Like, you can see it. People can dispute it all they want, but like, these games are on tape. Like, they're public. We got it.
Yeah. Debo is very much a me first diva wide receiver.
Which is so like, even that, there's levels to that. There are some guys like Jerry Rice was like, he was a diva too. There were some games where the Niners would blow people out and he'd be mad because he didn't get enough catches. But Jerry didn't show up out of shape. Jerry was in top form, ready to go all the time. Debo
went 100% every play.
Right. Like, Debo is not that. He has the mentality, but then he shows up out of shape and he's hurt all the time. I don't know.
He's not an AJ, or not AJ. He's not a AB Antonio Brown level diva, but he is a diva. He's somebody that has to be managed. Put it that way. I feel like.
And every team, it's okay to have those guys on the team. You can't have too many, but their production has to be worth it. And I think we're getting
to me. You put up with that if the guy gives 100%. If you got somebody that's that me first attitude and wants the ball all the time, and then is going to dog it if he's not going to get the ball, I got major problems with that. And that's why I've wanted Debo off the team since before he got the extension. That's a big part of why I have problems with Debo. I do not, to me, that's, if I was running a team, no way do I ever allow anybody to have that attitude.
I don't know if that's how you say that, but that's how I'm going to say it. It says Jerry never ran through guys every game like Derrick Henry either. It takes a toll on you. Of course, he's going to be tired someplace. If you're tired, come out of the game. Don't half-ass it if you're on the field. Like, that's
amazing. If he's going to get the ball, he doesn't half-ass it, but he only half-asses it when the play's not going to be run through him.
Yeah. The other thing that Mike said, which again, go check out the interview with Mike Silver. He said that Debo and Kittle, especially Kittle, he said, has a big presence in the locker room. He said that, Jimmy was a likable guy, but also like didn't text back. And I think the exact phrase he used was Kittle made it okay to like Jimmy, or cool to like Jimmy Garoppolo, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you.
No, like you don't prop up the people who are pulling their weight.
Right. Even if they are really likable guys.
Like, I get it. If you want to be a fan or a player that says, I don't have a year-round job, I'm allowed to take 2 months off and not have to interact and do all that. That's great. If you want to have that mentality, I get it, but you're not going to be the quarterback of my team.
Amen.
you can be that as any other position. But the starting quarterback on an NFL team that wants to win a Super Bowl absolutely must be obsessed 365 every year. That's it. Like it I understand you can't like order somebody to be that way, but if I'm looking at my starting quarterback and he is not that way, I'm moving on. It's one of those things that it became so much of a watching tape to understand what defenses are doing to you that you have to have a quarterback that's obsessed.
Even if you're tremendously physically blessed, like a Michael Vick or somebody like that, you still have to watch the film. And Jimmy clearly wasn't that guy. One more thing before we go, because I saw this. I put this in 49ers in 5. I could relate to it as a parent. John Feliciano tweeted a conversation he had with his daughter. He said, just picked up my kids from their sporty kids after school program where they play different sports each day. I asked her, quote, what sport did you play today? She says, you have to guess. It's the sport you failed at. Basketball, I guessed. She says, no, football. Remember, you lost the big game? That is so savage from John Feliciano's daughter, and I support it. Nobody keeps it real like kids, and that is hilarious.
Yeah, and it's a funny thing because they kind of know that they're burning you, but at the same time they're too young and naive to understand the level at which that really cuts you. You know what I mean? Like they know they're making it funny. They don't understand that they're cutting you down to the bone with a comment like that. You know what I mean? So it's this kind of funny thing where they know they're making a joke, but they don't know that they're like, you know, gonna say something that's worthy of the gif of, you know, everybody running away like, oh my God.
I mean, that is kids like the way that they could say the most savage thing. Like you would never say that to John Feliciano as a grown person, right?
Oh, no.
Like he might punch you in the face if you said that. But because it comes from a kid, and of course your kid, like it turns into a funny thing because you know that they don't have any malice behind it. But man, that hurts. And the fact that he posted it. Thank you, John, for posting it.
Yeah. Yeah, my question is, did your kid walk the rest of the way home?
Right. Like, did you just stop the car and yeah, I mean, man, that is, but you know what? That's maybe it helps him get over it in a weird way. You never know. Like to his daughter, it's like, yeah, you lost a big game. Like, it's not a big deal. Your kids help.
She doesn't understand what the Super Bowl really is.
Right. But they kind of give you that perspective that, you know, it is the Super Bowl. Yes, I get it. But also it's a football game.
Right.
You know, it's good. Anyway, that's going to do it for this edition of the show. Rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Like and subscribe to the channel. Again, go check out the interview with Mike Silver. I promise it's worth your time. There's time codes in there, so you can click right to any answer that interests you. I put it all in the description, so go and check it out, please, and thank you. Levin, I hope you have a fantastic Thursday.
I am going to watch Andrea Bocelli tonight.
So no, then.
Do you even know who that is?
Yeah, one of the tenors, right?
Yeah.
The
tenor.
So are you getting dragged to this thing? You said it like, oh, I get to go watch Andrea Bocelli.
I mean, it's not something I would normally spend money on my own, but it's also like that is truly one of the best voices of all time that you get to go watch. But I bought the tickets because my wife is a big fan. So it was her birthday is next week. So it was a kind of surprise. I spent a bunch of money on tickets.
This was a surprise. Happy birthday. Thanks for letting me go to Las Vegas in February.
Well, no, these were bought in October or November. So
okay. Wow. All right. So you bought them early in the season. Well, enjoy that if that's your jam. And have a good Thursday, everybody.
Boiler up.